Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of The View from the Top. And what a great edition we've got for you today. We've got some great guests. We've got some great things to talk about, great stuff to share, both technical and some fun stuff about what people are doing. A lot of interesting stuff out there. As ever, we are live on LinkedIn now. We're live on Facebook and we're live on YouTube. Please can I ask you to say hi to us. So join the conversation as the day goes on, as the afternoon goes on. Let us know who you are, where you are. We can't engage with you, the audience, unless you actually say something on the LinkedIn comments box or the Facebook comments box. Let us know. Tell us, where you're from in the world. We tend to get people from all over the world, right down from Australia, from India, from Hong Kong, Singapore, all over the States, all over Europe, the UK, the Nordics, all over the world. So tell us where you are, where you're coming from. And as the conversation goes through, please say, ask us questions. We've got some great guests today, and I'll tell you a bit about that in the moment. And we're doing some pretty fascinating stuff. I'd like to, I'm sure you'll agree, but ask us questions. That's what we're here for today, is we all get together. We are facing, the biggest challenge of our lifetimes in terms of global mobility. And the whole concept of mobility has been challenged by the fact that people just can't be mobile. So we need to address that. We need to understand that. Fortunately, we've got some great guests with us. As ever, we've got Julia Onslow-Cole, who's going to give you a global update on all matters immigration, all matters travel. And Julia's going to be telling us a little bit about everything that she's doing. We've also got two great guests from the corporate world. We've got Karen King from Kearney, and we've got Ryan Buzkist from FIS. And I'm going to be talking to them about their programs. We've also got Nitsan Udan, who's the CEO of Benevo, and he's going to talk about some pretty cool technology. And in fact, we'll do a really, really quick demo, probably just 5 minutes or so, to show you some technology, I think the likes of which you've probably never seen before. So let me just tell you a couple of things about today. Well, the first thing is, as I said, we've got our special guests, and let me just introduce them to you. So we've got with us Karen King from Kearney. So Karen, you're there.
Hello, everyone.
How are you doing, Karen?
Good, thank you, Brian.
Good. Well, it's good to have you on board for this special edition. We'll be coming to talk about your program in a while, but I just wanted to introduce you to everybody out there in LinkedIn world. And we've also got Ryan. So Ryan Ryan Buzkist from FIS. So Ryan, it's great to have you on the show. We're looking forward to having a really good chat with you.
Thanks, Brian. Good to be here.
And then we've got, as ever, we've got Julia Onslow-Cole. So Julia, it's great to have you on the show, Julia, once again. And you're going to be giving us your global update in a moment, aren't you?
Yes. Yeah.
And then our final guest for today is we've got Nitsan Udan, who's the CEO of Benevo. And Nitsan's going to be talking about some of the interesting technology developments that Benevo has been launched with the free COVID-19 tool. That's right, isn't it, Nitsan?
Yeah. Hi, everyone.
Okay, so before we get into that, what I do want to do is just talk a little bit about some of the things that are going on, which I think you might find of interest. The first thing is that we've actually launched a remobilization checklist. And if you haven't downloaded it, then I strongly urge you to. It's completely free, and it's on the Benevo website. If you just simply go to benevo.com, you'll find the remobilization checklist. Let me tell you what it is and what it isn't. The first thing is the checklist doesn't give you any answers. Okay, so we're not trying to give you any answers. What the checklist does do is it gives you the questions. And these are the questions that we feel every global mobility director should be addressing with their teams. Let me give you an idea of the sorts of things the checklist covers. It's got 12 categories to it. There's things like the business model that you're operating on. How's that business model going to be in the new world post-remobilization? Maybe when more people are working from home, maybe there's less business travel. What's your business model going to be like? It then goes down to asking questions about your policies and processes. At the moment, your policies and processes are being stress tested, maybe in a way they've never been stress tested before. What are you going to do with things like COLA and per diems and allowances and deductibles? What the policy you've got at the moment, is that right for the new world? Those are the sorts of questions in the checklist. But other things in there, immigration and visas. Do you know who you want to prioritize when we start mobilizing again? There's no doubt that your immigration advisor is going to be incredibly busy in the new world because there will be a logjam of moves. Well, you need to work with your immigration advisor. I'm sure Julia would agree with this from a Fragomen perspective, to work out who you're going to prioritize and where those jams are going to be. Something similar goes on with tax. What are you going to be doing about tax? If people are working from home, do you understand all the issues regarding permanent establishment or VAT or personal tax implications of somebody maybe working in a different country? It also deals, the checklist also deals with things like cost containment. It deals with things like duty of care, healthcare, insurance, employee experience, travel. It deals with how you're going to communicate the new policy or the remobilization strategy to your assignees and to the line. It talks about how you're going to implement the new policy. And then the very last area it talks about is actually your internal mobility team. Do you need to restructure your internal mobility team for the new world that we're looking at? We are hoping that this checklist will be really useful to you. So as I said, it's completely free. Do feel free to download it. Okay, what I do want to do now is let's bring Nitsan into the show. And Nitsan, hi. I mean, one of the things I want to talk to you about now, if I may, is the whole COVID-19 support tool. Now, I know that we at Benevo have developed this COVID-19 support tool, and we've been supported by a lot of companies. And I thought maybe it makes sense just for me to name check all these amazing companies that have helped us. We've got Fragomen, Impact Group, REA Partners in Transition, King and Mayer, Global Excel, World Pet Travel, Airing, Living Abroad, Net Expat, Bennett International Schools. If I've missed anybody out, I apologize. And I know there's always more coming along. And one of the things that I understand, Nitsan, that you've developed now, and correct me if I'm wrong, is a tool that actually allows companies to know where their employees are, which I know from talking to corporates out there is a really big issue, wanting to know where their employees are. So perhaps you could just tell us a little bit about that, and maybe even, show us a very quick demo before we get into the Immigration World Tour.
Will do. Thanks, Brian. So exactly as you said, we built a pro bono free tool that we offer for clients and non-clients with the intention of helping people who are now relocated in this time of stress with support, that we've really lucky to be able to get a lot of the industry players, as you mentioned, to come with us and be kind of apps that are hosted on the Benevo platform and can add additional value on their free services and content that they deliver. On top of that, we also asked corporates to challenge us. Tell us what are your challenge, and we've made a commitment that we will solve it within 3 working days, because this tool is one of the unique abilities of it is the ability for us to roll out with any corporate within 3 working days. And when we asked for that challenge, we got the challenge. We got a few and we solved them. And one of the interesting ones that we've got was exactly as you said about the challenge of finding where are my employees in a way that is following data privacy regulations globally, as well as ability to not require employees to log into a system, because some might do it, some might not, etc. So how do we solve that challenge? And this double challenge, how do we solve that? And what the team has done is worked very, very hard to build this tool. We released the first version after 3 days, and now I'm going to do a quick demo to show just this. I'm not going to show the entire COVID-19 support tool. For anyone who wants to see it, they can either browse on previous sessions that we've done, or contact us and we'll be able to arrange that. But I'm just gonna share my screen and and share only part of the reporting. So the tool we built is for assignees and people relocating. It also has a different side that is for the HR manager, which this part can only be accessed by the HR manager. Just want to validate, Brian, that you can see my screen?
We can see your screen. It's looking good.
Great. Okay. So as part of this reporting tool for HR, what we've built here is the ability to find where are my employees at any given time based on their IP, their IP address, Internet Protocol address. And the use cases that we found now that we've launched it, and we've added it for all our existing clients and all non-clients who wanted that as part of the COVID-19 tool, and it works very, very well. And the feedback we are getting is fantastic because it's not only helping companies with solving the challenge of during time of crisis, but where are my employees, but also better planning. So one of our clients has used that in order to prepare events, because they do want to give the opportunity for some people to meet, but as these are early career program and those people don't join, they were not sure where they are now. And now they have exact maps, locations that they can decide where are the right places to create in-person events and optimize travel costs as well. So many use cases, really fascinating to see how it works, but let's see how the tool works. So it gives a few parameters, which is when is the last time we've been able to see where are their employees, and we've implemented AI, artificial intelligence, that updates that all the time based on a number of resources of data. And on a map, I can see where are my employees globally, or I can see a table about each of these employees. We've of course anonymized here to protect, but this is all real live data. And I can search, I can filter, I can, if I want to export, I can export it, really to decide how I want to play with it. And I'm just going to show quickly how it works on the map, because visually that's kind of the nicest.
So this is pretty cool technology, isn't it, Sam? What this is doing, I think it's the first, is this is allowing any global mobility manager to know where all their employees are at a particular point in time.
Correct. And let's say I want to look at a specific office. So I'll choose, let's say, my office in Zurich. And I want to see where are the employees of this office, right? So everything will now get updated. So I don't see everyone globally, but just the employees of this office. And I can see, okay, everyone is in Europe. That looks okay. That was where I expecting, but actually, whoops, seems like someone is in the US. I was not expecting to have anyone in the US. It might have tax or immigration compliance issues. I can click on that and immediately see who is this person, get their contact details, and see if there is any action I want to know, if I want to engage with them, and etc. So there is a lot of filtering capability. I can create here custom views for me to decide how I want to see that, how I want to interact with the data on different levels of finding basically in which locations are the employees, what is it impact, and even in case of an emergency, I can trigger a notification to ask everyone to update their location. Now, what also is important is that employees, we respect and we believe in data privacy. So every employee can choose what do they share, how do they share it, and they can even choose, of course, not to share their location. And a final point on this before we wrap up is that it can also cover the location of the dependent. Right, so if the employee wants to give that access, they can share it, and then the corporate, when needed, the employer can have access to this information. That's what I wanted to share.
Okay, thank you so much, Nitzan. That's really helpful, and that's just included as part of the standard COVID-19 tool and the normal tool as well, isn't it?
Correct, and correct, 100%. Like we are a cloud-based company, so every feature that we roll out, we can roll out to all clients, and we don't charge, of course, extras for this. This is how we believe we can add value, and it's a big opportunity for me also to say a big thank you to the team who worked extremely hard weekends and nights to make sure that this tool is live, fast, and provide value when needed.
Okay, well, thank you. It's been great having you on the show, and well done with the new tool. Let's just see who's out there in LinkedIn world. We've got hundreds of people listening in from LinkedIn. In terms of where you're coming from, we've got New Delhi, we've got Chicago, Virginia, Connecticut, Germany, Bangalore, Switzerland, oh gosh, Portugal, Belgium, Switzerland, St. Louis, Dallas, Brazil, India. So people are coming in from all over the world to listen to this. Can I ask everybody in LinkedIn, if you are enjoying the show, can you just let us know where you're from? Just say hi so we know who's there. But also ask questions. If you've got any questions on the technology, then do ask those. And also what I'm going to do now is I'm going to bring Julia Onslow-Cole into the show. And Julia, maybe you can just sort of, I know you normally do a trip around the world.
Yeah.
So, obviously every week is like a lifetime, that the sort of changes we're getting every week. Everything is moving so fast. So perhaps you could start just giving us a bit of your tour as to everything that's going on in the world of immigration in the last week. And again, people in LinkedIn world, if you've got questions for Julia, please ask them as we go along, and we'll do our best to answer any questions that you've got.
Thanks, Brian. Thanks very much. And thanks, Nissan. That's a really interesting tool, and I'm sure people will find that really valuable going forward. So I'm just going to start with China, and you are aware that we have a travel ban in China, and that is for only people that are permanent residents, Chinese citizens of Hong Kong, Macau and Taiwan can enter. But when that China ban was announced by the China's Ministry of Foreign Affairs, they said it wasn't applicable to any visas that were issued after the 28th of March. And you'll recall that last week I said that Becky Xia, who's our partner in China, had confirmed that she hadn't seen any visas issued after the 28th of March. But as kind of breaking news is that when I spoke to her yesterday morning, she said that she was now aware that there were 200 visas issued to Korean citizens, and they had actually landed in China. So this is a really important piece of information, because this is the first time we've actually seen the Chinese embassies issuing visas. And you'll recall that there's a really big pent-up demand of companies wanting to send executives back to China who are on work visas. And we've been talking over the last couple of weeks that it's not sufficient anymore just to have your work visa. You actually have to apply for a re-entry visa. And if you're an A work permit holder, that means you have to get an official invitation letter from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, which is in a different office in each city. And if you're a B work permit holder, you have to get pre-employment authorization documentation. And then when you get these visas, you can then convert them when you're in China. Now, I've had lots of LinkedIn questions, and I don't mind at all answering them. And I have had lots since last week with people writing in to say they've had real trouble getting any information at the Chinese embassies or consulates, and how can we help them, and what tips are there? So I asked Becky Xia about this, and she said the best tip is that if you're having problems from these Chinese diplomatic posts and you're a member of a Chinese Chamber of Commerce, you should approach your Chinese Chamber of Commerce, because they will help you. And if you're not a member of the Chinese Chamber of Commerce, then you should go to the commercial section of the embassy and explain you're a business and you want to bring people back to China. And then in our experience, they'll contact the visa section and things will move quite quickly, because it's very difficult otherwise to find out the dates and opening times and documents, etc. So I think that's a really good tip which you should follow. And now we know that there are visas being issued, it's even more important that you are actively doing this. The other thing is another theme on China. We've been talking about how strict the quarantine rules are, the health rules, and how important it is to give your assignees, when you send them back, full advice about all of these other requirements. And we talked last week about a brand new requirement, which is if you were going from a high risk to a low risk city, so like Shanghai to Haikou, you had to go to a government authority and take a test. And I said to you that this week I would tell you what sort of test it is and how long it lasts, because it was just breaking news last week. And in fact, it's only, just a test to see if you're COVID-19 positive. So you have to take it every time you go into a different city. So that's an important thing to bear in mind. And just as an example of the quarantine strictness, if you're quarantined at home, and remember I said there were cases where you would not be quarantined at home, but you would be in a government facility. But if you're at home, you're only allowed out 5 times a day. That's twice to get your temperature taken by a government official, twice to take food from a courier, and once to empty your bin. So really strict rules, and you must ensure that your assignees know all about these rules to before they go back. Just wanted to say a couple of words about Hong Kong. You'll see in the news that the protesters have started in Hong Kong, and mainland China is reacting very strongly. And this is a global phenomena where you see that some states that are more authoritarian have actually used the COVID-19 crisis to leverage their positions. And this is something that Mark Ellis and Baroness Helena Kennedy of the International Bar Association have written extensively about, and I really would urge you all to read it. It's very fascinating, and it's a really quite a poor phenomena that's coming out of the crisis. So just turning to Singapore, I did explain last week there was this massive spike of cases, and they were coming from the migrant dormitories, and the authorities have acted really quickly, and luckily, because the migrants are generally very healthy and young, they haven't had many hospitalization cases, and they've been accommodated on cruise ships and in the expo center to quarantine. But the circuit breaker, this rule that Singapore's lockdown is extending until the 1st of June. Now, we've been talking a lot in the last couple of weeks about people who are in Singapore and you want to extend their stay. And we've had questions about what if you get this document saying final extension warning. And I said last week that my partner, Mark Buchanan, who heads Asia Pac and is based in Singapore, said that not to worry because you can extend it further, but we're now finding we're only getting 30 days. But he actually, when I spoke to him, had a really good top tip, which was that we had a few senior executives who's brought their older children who are at university in places like the US into Singapore before the travel ban. So these are dependent children, but too old to benefit from the immigration rules. And he said that a good idea would be to look to see if you could get work holiday visas, which are valid for 6 months for those dependents. So I think that's a really helpful idea.
Okay, and if I could just come in, Julia, getting lots of comments from people around the world just saying hi and that they're here. One particular question, it's from Yuki Watanabe. Yuki was in fact a guest on this show a few weeks back. Yuki is the Global Mobility Director at the Gap. Mm-hmm. And this is a question from Yuki. She says, Julia, when do you think centralized quarantine will move to home quarantine in China?
It very much depends on cities by city. So it's not a holistic regulation. I know around Beijing it's more popular to have in a government facility, but it also depends on how your circumstances are at home, like how many people are living with you at home and what sort of circumstances you have. And that's why it's really important, Yuki, to find out about the quarantine rules in the place you're sending your assignee to before you send them back, so that you can say actually they're going to be in a flat on their own or just with their wife, and make the case that they can do it at home.
Okay, well, we'll let you move on. Great answer, Julia. Great question, Yuki. And yeah, keep the questions coming in. But Julia, why don't you continue your world tour?
So I've had a few LinkedIn questions this week about Australia and New Zealand, and it's quite interesting because yesterday they held some discussions between Australia and New Zealand about having this TransTasman travel bubble, and it was a constitutional first because Jacinda Ardern, the Prime Minister of New Zealand, actually attended the Cabinet Office meeting in Australia. And I just think it's a really interesting thing to point out because South Korea and China are having very similar talks. So what I think we might find going forward is these like little bubbles of kind of free movement where you find that countries trust one another's travel policies and health regulations. And I think that's just quite an interesting thing to point out.
Okay, thank you. Yuki, by the way, came back in answer to your question about local areas. She said Shanghai was the area she was looking at.
I'll tell her, Yuki, I'll look up Shanghai for her and get her the quarantine regulations.
Okay, there's a promise to you, Yuki. We'll get back to you on that one.
Yeah.
Okay, moving on around the world.
Yes, so moving to the Middle East and Africa. So the UAE, we talked last week, we said that their lockdown's gradually being lifted. You can staff your office, but it mustn't be more than 30% of the normal staffing levels. It's very strictly enforced. There's people doing inspections, and if you breach those levels, you'll get a warning or you'll shut down. Also, we did discuss quite at length this whole thing about there's being an automatic extension for people in the UAE until Christmas, but worries about that because it'll mean all your assignees will expire together, and more worries about what's going to be showing in the passport, and also what's going to happen if you leave the country. And Haida Hussein, who is my partner in the UAE, has prepared a really helpful 3-page guide. And I talked to Brian and Nitsan about it, and we're going to put it on the Benito website and obviously host it on the Fragomen website. So hopefully that will help. And hopefully by next week we'll have some more clarity, but it is quite confusing. And then a slither of good news from Saudi Arabia is that you can get your money back now and ask for a refund if there's any unused work visas for foreign nationals that were issued after March the 18th who couldn't enter Saudi. So just moving on to Africa, my colleague Lunga Mani has given me an update on Africa. Unfortunately, it's not good news that the rate of infection is really, really high and rising. And unfortunately, obviously not a lot of the countries in Africa don't have any social assistance programs, and they have difficulty with social distancing. So it's very difficult, and the international flights are suspended. And it's also actually very difficult at the moment. We're trying to move people between African countries, citizens of one country to another. It's very difficult. So hopefully the situation will improve by next week. So moving on to Europe, we're seeing restrictions gradually easing across Europe. But I would just keep giving this warning that we're seeing a lot of clients doing remobilization planning with Brian's checklist in Europe. And the difficulty is that the easiest thing to do is just take an EU citizen and move them to another EU country. But you must remember posted worker notification compliance. It's really, really important. And then I attended a call this week with the Home Office stakeholding group, and basically they reiterated the UK government's intent to bring in a new immigration system in January 2021. And a lot of businesses had expressed real concern about that, but the government said, no, we really need to do this. And in fact, COVID-19 has underscored the need to make sure that the UK has the right people. And so there will be this new system from January. So lastly, moving on to the USA, we did last week go through the history of what's happened, the tweet that President Trump gave, followed by the proclamation. And the proclamation, you'll recall, has very narrow effect because it basically prohibits people from going to a US consulate to get permanent residence. And for business applications, they're mostly done inside the US. And in any event, the US consulates are closed. I'm really grateful to Bo Cooper and to Patrick Shen, who are from our government strategies group in Washington, because what they have highlighted, and what I explained last week, is that what people are really worried about was not that proclamation, but the fact that the president has to be told within 30 days what is the effects of non-immigrant programs, that's like H-1Bs and Ls, were having on the US economy. And you'll recall that we talked last week about a conference call that was held at the White House with supporters of the president, where they indicated that there was a broader plan. So since last week, talking to Bo and Patrick, it does appear that from their conversations about what's happening, we could hear as soon as 30 days. And it's very likely that these policies that are coming are not just COVID-19. They're going to include some policies that the White House had wanted to adopt several years ago, but have been unable to do so. So that we know that the White House is very much involved in these discussions. And what we think that they're seeking to do is they're seeking to put in requirements for when you hire H-1Bs or H-2Bs, which are seasonal workers, or J-1s, exchange visitors, that you show that you've done a labour certification and there's no US workers to do the job. Now, obviously, that creates all sorts of questions, because many of these programs take a year before you finally get your visa. So if you're going to have to do proof that no one else could do the job, do you do it now or do you do it retrospectively? There's lots and lots of questions. So as we go on, we'll get some clarity. And finally, the last thing, I just wanted to say that my colleague Laura Weingart and Leona Echeverro from Latin America has done a really, really long, detailed readout of what's happening in Latin America. And I'm just going to put some of that up on my LinkedIn because we don't have time to cover it. But really, in essence, there is a continuation of the travel ban, and most of the government agencies that are administering immigration applications are closed until mid-May. Thank you, Brian.
Thank you. And just a couple of comments from LinkedIn for you, Julia. This first one is regarding the UK, and the comment is, would you expect restrictions in certificate of sponsorship allocations in the UK?
That's a really good question. I think it's not really clear now. I'd have to ask my good friend Ian Robinson and Louise Haycock. I think that it's not really very clear. I mean, at the moment, there's a very high level view of what the system will be, but obviously we'll know more as we go along. But I could talk about it more next week.
Okay, thank you very much, Julia, and see you again next week. What we're going to do now is to bring on our corporate guests, and I'm delighted to say we've got two very senior directors of global mobility who are going to be talking a little bit about their programs. And let me just bring them on. So first of all, we've got Karen King of Kearney. Hi there, Karen.
Hello, Brian.
And we've also got Ryan Buskist from FIS. So hi to you both. Great having you on the show. You both got pretty substantial programs. You're both with companies that I think a lot of people know, but there might be people that don't know your companies as well. So Karen, if I could start with you, could you just tell us a little bit about Kearney and your program?
Yes, of course. Thank you, Brian. It's a pleasure to be here with you today. So I'm based in Chicago, and I co-lead the mobility function with our employment tax lead, actually, at Kearney, a global management consulting firm with offices in more than 40 countries, serving more than 3/4 of the Fortune 500 firms. From a mobility perspective, we have over 700 program participants, the majority of which is client-facing project mobility. As you might expect from a consulting firm, project mobility is the DNA of our firm. We have, on average, 72% of our consultants traveling annually to more than 80 countries each year for work purposes. So certainly that creates lots of opportunity for preemptive tax planning and tracking of our employees. We also have a robust self-initiated one-way transfer program with relocation support and a handful of strategic assignments, primarily on local plus packages.
Cool. And Ryan, tell us. I mean, Kearney obviously is is a company that's out there, is traveling. Got people traveling around all over the world. I mean, we'll get into the whole the impact that coronavirus has had on you in a moment. But Ryan, just before we get into the general debate, just tell us a little bit about yourself. You've moved around a bit, haven't you? You're sort of US American by background, and you've worked in various places around the world. Tell us a bit about yourself and a bit about FIS as well.
Sure. So yes, I have moved around a bit. I'm originally from Louisiana in the States, and started out my career as a tax accountant at KPMG. Did a few years in America, and then took an assignment myself to Melbourne in Australia for 4 years, which was fantastic. And then landed here in London about 10 years ago at then SunGard, which was eventually acquired by FIS, who I'm still with now. And so FIS is a fintech company, so we look after technology for banks, financial institutions in our sort of capital markets area and our banking solutions area. And then also we have a merchant solutions area, which is around payment. So WorldPay might be a name that people are familiar with when they're making payments at shops when we used to be able to go to shops. And so that's a name, a brand that we have as well. So from a program, we have about 350-ish moves that we touch every year, and we have a broad range of different moves. Just under half are sort of point-to-point transfers, but we do a mix of other things that are sort of client-facing, as Karen mentioned as well, so project-based and developmental assignments and those types of things as well.
And WorldPay, certainly we at Beniva know well, because when we have a facility that many people will be aware of called Pay Later, and we use WorldPay to deliver that facility around the world. So we're certainly very happy customers of yours.
Great.
So tell me, in both your cases, in the period drama that used to be the time before 6 weeks ago, feels like a different era, doesn't it? You had your moves, and I think, Karen, you said to me that you move about 700 or so people a year, and Ryan, I think you said you move about half that number, those sorts of numbers. My question, though, is not so much what you used to do, but what are you doing now? Are you moving anybody at all, or has it completely ground to a halt at the moment?
So with the exception of one expat that's in the process of repatriating, he's back in the US trying to re-enter China to finish his repatriation. So that's a challenging situation we have now. But our assignees and transfers have remained in country. Several moves continued to the extent possible in Q1. Some of them had to follow the country quarantine rules. But for the most part, the remainder of our pipeline has been put on hold for now, and returning to the offices and client sites is being carefully planned stages.
And did you have to bring people back as well? Were you into some forced repatriations?
No, we weren't. In our case, I know many other companies experienced that, but we haven't. As I say, just with the exception of the one expat who was in the process of repatriating anyway.
Okay, and what about you, Ryan? I mean, I said you've got 300-ish assignees or moves in a typical year. Are you now down to zero or close to zero?
Close enough, yeah. I mean, obviously things did grind to halt quite quickly. We similarly looked at our people that were repatriating soon and sort of moved some of those forward, so they weren't sort of stuck in the country that they were going to be leaving soon anyway. So we did a bit of that. But no forced moves, no forced repatriations or anything like that we were involved in, which was quite good. Having a handle on sort of we have quite a sizable commuter population, so make sure they were sort of back in their home country was something we needed to do as well in the sort of initial stages. But yeah, going forward, or sort of since then, it has been sort of stopped effectively. So all moves have to go through a leadership team to be approved if they're going to go ahead. So I'm only aware of, I think, one or two that have sort of gone ahead since the sort of lockdown started. So yeah, it's pretty. We're still doing a lot of planning and still raring to go when things are back up and running. But the actual moves have sort of ground to a halt. Yes.
Well, maybe let's talk a little bit about sort of planning for the future and remobilization. At the top of the show, I talked a bit about the checklist that we've put together. I mean, obviously, there's any number of, these were just our ideas. I'm sure there's any number of other ideas that other companies have, but we just thought it was useful to put something out there. But, from your companies, have you started looking at thinking about, what the future might look like and how you might be adjusting your policy or programs in any way for the future? Is that a conversation that's going on internally?
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Ryan.
Okay.
Ryan, go on. You go first.
Okay, sorry. So we certainly have, and I know Karen might speak a bit around what they're doing at a broader company level. We certainly started having those discussions from an office opening perspective, and obviously we need to have those decisions made before we can start mobilizing people. But we have certainly taken the opportunity to out of necessity, we've had to do some creative things around staffing some of the more project-based assignments. So how we would normally put people on a plane to go and do something, how we can still meet the client need in the short term because of necessity. And so what we're doing is sort of looking at how we can broaden that out to a future-looking sort of offering. So something we're calling virtual assignments, which is something we'd had on the agenda for a while, thinking about how we can make the policy more inclusive, more than out of necessity. So, are there people that would love to go to have an experience overseas, but for some reason can't, whether it's a family reason or whatnot, and looking at how we could offer that to give another population of people access to mobility in a virtual sense. But now we're sort of changed slightly and seeing how we can leverage that sort of thinking out of the things we've had to do more recently, and looking at what sort of policy we might be able to put in place whereby we can still facilitate some of these projects that are happening overseas, or opportunities for people for development, but actually not move them. And obviously that has challenges around PE and other things that we're looking into, but we're started getting the ball rolling on some of those discussions that were sort of future state, where now we're sort of taking advantage of the situation to move forward a bit more quickly.
Yeah, I mean, I'm getting the feeling there's going to be two competing things going on here. On the one hand, I think to encourage employees to move, and there might be a bit of reluctance to move, it's going to be all about enhancing the employee experience to make sure that they really want to move and they feel comfortable moving. On the other hand, I'm envisaging that there's going to be a lot of company pressure to cut cost, because obviously this is a severe hit to any company's finances, and the purse strings will be tight. I mean, Karen, from your perspective, have you done any planning around this, and are you seeing these sorts of pressures or issues coming out?
Well, so I've been I have to say, I've been really proud of the way Kearney has handled the pandemic. From the firm's initial response to recovery planning, the health and safety of all employees has been the firm's top priority and focus. And, the firm has instituted regular communications from the managing partner, regional and country leader, the CHRO, and that has all been key to helping everyone stay connected, informed, and engaged. There's been weekly HR, legal, and leadership COVID task force meetings to provide the necessary oversight, and global response and recovery frameworks and have been put in place to guide local countries in developing country-specific plans. So, and I've been able to be part of this recovery plan, which is from a broader perspective. The focus has been these past few weeks on creating this global framework to guide the local country recovery planning for the very slow office reopenings and for travel, back to client sites and such. And these guidelines, are based on WHO, health systems, government responses, and they lead local country HR and leadership through several stages of recovery, release, ramp up, relaunch, as they develop their own country-specific plans. The decision-making authority is defined, office and travel checklists, were provided around, how to, again, maintain the health and safety of employees, but regional and partners, across the company. And key points in that communication is safety is first and foremost, and needs to be the primary factor in determining how we re-enter the workplace, both at Kearney and client locations. And so we're sort of in a don't rush this, ramp up gradually, be prepared if resurgence occurs. Work from home is preferred. If in doubt, employees stay at home. These kinds of points that are being made not only to leadership, but then also in a global communication. Informing employees that these recovery plans are underway and sharing the planning principles that we have, because perception matters. Communicating thoughtful planning, that is taking place for a safe return is reinforcing that we care and that we're all in this together, kind of thing. So that's kind of what our focus has been the last few the few weeks and on these stages. slowly, bringing people back.
I mean, you mentioned this fact that there's going to be a level of concern about looking after the employees, and I get all that. We've had a question in that I'll just throw out to you both. It's a very interesting one. It's from Tom Brune, and he says this: because of the need for far more rigid quality control standards, do we anticipate that organisations will prohibit employees from utilising Airbnb type solutions for extended temporary living? Because we have seen a lot of these sort of what do you want to call it, low-cost assignments coming in, especially for more junior assignees. And maybe some of that is coming in with lump sum where people have got a lot more freedom to do what they want. And the question Tom is asking is, do we now feel that duty of care, or he doesn't say that specifically, but I think that's what he's getting at, but that sort of concept is coming in that's going to say, well, actually, we've got to be a bit more careful about exactly what's happening to our employees. And his question specifically was about Airbnb type solutions.
Yeah, well, I can say from a corporate travel perspective, we already do not support Airbnb type solutions. We require our employees to book their temporary accommodation through hotels and temporary corporate facilities that have been vetted by the company. And I think that'll increase. I think our travel group has already, vetted the relationships that we have to ensure that they are, imposing the right hygiene standards and such, so that they meet the standards that we're expecting for our own.
Okay.
We're sort of in a similar position around just policy-wise, but I guess just you would think that maybe the ones we weren't involved in, perhaps where we were giving a cash allowance and the employee was doing it themselves, maybe to the questions, to the point of the question was, maybe we will see going forward that we're going to need to be asking questions that we weren't doing before, just to make sure that we're comfortable that what the person's doing themselves is good enough, in case something else happens or we have further lockdowns that come going forward, and make sure they're in the right environment to bear that out.
Okay, and out there in LinkedIn, if you've got any more questions for Karen and Ryan, keep them coming in. We'll do our best to answer your questions as they come in. But let me just move the conversation on. I mean, you're not moving anybody at the moment. So how are you managing your own teams? Because maybe you tell us a bit about your own mobility team, and how are you working together, and what are the discussions, what's going on at the moment within the mobility team in a world where there is no mobility at the moment?
Yeah, so we are, we're continuing to focus on enhancing the employee experience in our program by using this time to refresh and streamline our processes for one. We're doing sort of research on big trends and trying to take advantage of the current environment and how we think the future workplace will change, and we absolutely think that it will. To apply it to, what does that mean? One, as an example, one consideration for us is to create a global mobility online community with new and past participants as an extension of settling in services after arrival in country. We have an advocate program of past participants that guide, new participants, and following on that program and using them to create these virtual global mobility online communities is one idea of some of the discussions we're having.
Okay, and Ryan, what's going on in I mean, I don't know how big your teams are actually. In fact, Karen, how big is your team? Can you just say a bit about that?
Well, so, again, because it's mostly project mobility, it's very heavy tax and immigration focused. And although immigration is decentralized across the firm and owned by country HR, the tax bit of it is very heavy. So if I combine our global mobility, which is our in-house transfers, and our project mobility, we have a team of 7.
Okay. And Ryan, tell us about what's going on in your team at the moment.
So we've got a team of 12. I think I've done a quick sums in my head while you were talking. So my group looks after both the Global Mobility Program and the Global Business Travel Program. So I have a sort of pre-travel compliance whole process that goes on. So I look after both of those. So my team, first, it would be remiss if I said that it's not like nothing is happening. Obviously, as I said a little while ago, we still have lots of queries coming in, and we're still doing a lot of planning for the future and also maintaining the ones that are already on assignment with their sort of questions. So there is all that going on. But similarly to what Karen said, we had actually already embarked this year on sort of we were going to do a bit of a mobility redesign to sort of look at our processes, look at our experience across the different stakeholders, and just sort of have a bit of a reimagine. So we've actually redeployed specifically probably the more global business travel side of things, because that's just stopped versus the assignees who we still have out there that we're still doing some work on, and really finding opportunities with them that they wouldn't have maybe had the capacity to work on that project in as much detail as they are now. So we're just really trying to redeploy internally on this sort of big project that we're working on that we're still pressing ahead with. And then since we sit in the talent team, we're also at the moment looking at how we can find broader connections to sort of, I hate using management terms, like break out of our silos. So we're so comfortable in our mobility space, but is there something in one of the other sort of peer groups that looks after talent management or performance management that we can get on a project that they're working on, just to sort of do some of that cross-pollination while we've got a bit of capacity and a bit of scope to do that. So we're trying to be a bit creative on how we use the time that's out there with the team.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned, thinking out the box, and I think someone this year just broke the box. I think the box isn't there. I mean, I remember thinking, I think about this the other day, is that if you go back a couple of years, every single organization I know, and certainly every consulting firm, seemed to produce a paper called Vision 2020. What 2020 is going to be like. I know PwC did a great one on global mobility on 2020. I mean, everybody did 2020 visions. The fact is, every single company in the world got it wrong. There's not a company out there that got their 2020 vision right, because none of us predicted the world that we are in now. My old dad of blessed memory had a favorite joke, and his favorite joke was, how do you make God laugh? And the answer was, tell him what you're doing tomorrow. I think the point in all that is that, we can plan for the future, and we've got to plan for the future, but none of us, and this is what I think COVID-19 has taught us, none of us knows what the future is going to be like. Which brings me on to a question, actually, a great question from, a hard question, I'm afraid, but a great question from Deb Crouch. And Deb's question is this: in your organizations, do you feel that COVID-19 will change the way you handle mobility in the future? And this is the hard bit. And if so, what do you expect will be the biggest changes?
Yeah.
Okay, so go for it, Karen.
Yeah, so absolutely. I think, first of all, from a broader firm perspective, I think we recognize that many elements of the current environment, virtual work, leveraging digital tools, collaboration and connection, higher global standards for health and hygiene protocols, etc., including a greater degree of this connectedness and caring that we've all been experiencing in this environment, carry forward into the future and reshape the way we work in our workplace. I think our operating model as the firm is likely to change. We've seen success with virtual ways of working the past few months. And while there still obviously is a need for face-to-face, perhaps the frequency of that face-to-face with teams and clients will change. Perhaps we will see less business travel. Could this lead to new ways of working, meaning we don't need as much office space or real estate requirements? I think from a mobility perspective, I think maybe Nitin or you mentioned it earlier that, working virtually, if location is other than your employment country, could also lead to some compliance issues if you don't know the location of your employees. And so this is going to lead employers to require heftier tracking of employee locations to a greater extent. I think from a relocation perspective, we're likely to see more virtual surveys and virtual house hunt trips and other types of virtual relocation activity. We've experienced that with the situation I mentioned earlier with our expat in the process of repatriating to the U.S. from China. His household goods are still in China and he can't re-enter. And so, we took advantage of that virtual survey process, and which I think will become something that will continue in the future.
Okay, and Ryan, from your perspective, how do you see your policy or program evolving post COVID-19 or as a result of COVID-19?
Yeah, I mean, I think our core of our policy will probably remain the same, apart from what I mentioned before about maybe this sort of new virtual assignment policy. But I think, just seeing what we've seen so far around some of the questions around the things that we were planning to do, I think we'll probably see a lot more questions of whether we need to do this or can we do it a different way. And it's not that we couldn't have staffed some of these projects virtually before, but a lot of times it wasn't something the client wanted or needed. They thought they needed someone on site to be helping them. So I think out of necessity, we've proven that there's a different way to go about some of these things. And then by virtue of the fact that we've proven it, there might be questions now when we're pitching for projects or even just internally when we're trying to move someone. Do we need to move this person? Can they not do it where they are? So I think there'll be a lot more questions around what we're trying to do, certainly in the short term from cost pressures, as you mentioned before, but then longer term, just behavioral differences and that we've seen. But it will be interesting to see how long that lasts before we sort of get back into our sort of normal routine of things. But yeah, those are the types of things I think will come up in the short term.
Yeah. I agree. I think the industry might continue to see a further reduction in traditional assignments. If business travel combined with virtual work can be just as impactful, that will definitely have an impact.
Yeah, I mean, we haven't really got time to go into it now, but I will do a separate broadcast on it in a few days' time. I wrote an article about 6 months ago, maybe it was even longer than that, saying, have we passed peak global mobility? And my concern was that with all the pressure coming in from the change in the type of assignment, pressures on cost, technology, that I thought actually we were getting to the point where we might have passed the peak number of moves. And I got a lot of pushback, and people had two sorts of views. There's some people that agreed and said, yes, the world has changed. People can work from home. We're going to see a lot less mobility. Others said, no, we're going to see a different type of mobility. We're still going to see mobility, but we're going to see more short-term moves. I think now the pendulum might change the other way. I think we might see a reduction in mobility, but in particular, a reduction in short-term mobility, because business travel has been hit hardest than everything. I mean, to take a simple example, you've got a 2-day business meeting somewhere, and to do that 2-day business meeting, you've got 2 weeks of quarantine when you arrive, and 2 weeks of quarantine when you arrive home, and you've got 4 hours going through every airport as they do health tests on you before you go on the plane, and the journey's not very pleasant because you've got to wear a mask all the time, and you can't get served food or maybe even use the restroom. And you also find that the cost of travel has gone up because the airlines are social distancing and therefore they've got to put up their prices. We're going to see a lot less business travel. On the other hand, I think we will see more longer term assignments and permanent assignments, because that's going to be the way to get people to move. In other words, if you're going, you're going, and there's no the commuter assignment might be something that fades away a bit.
Yeah. I think definitely in the short term, there will be an impact on short-term travel, business travel, as companies cautiously re-enter. We don't expect to see much of any impact on our self-initiated transfer program, as these are typically for personal reasons, and that need will remain, and some career development reasons, et cetera. I think that will continue for us.
Okay, well, we're actually pretty much out of time. I mean, we allow ourselves an hour. The hour is pretty much up. All that really remains is for me to thank all our guests. I'll just bring Julia back onto screen. So to thank you to Karen from Kearney, to Ryan from FIS, and Julia, as ever, many thanks for your global tour de force. It's been great having everybody here. Hopefully everybody out in LinkedIn world has really enjoyed the show. We will be back again, same time next week. Our guest next week, just to let you know, we've got, I like to think we've always got great guests, and certainly we had great guests today, but our great guests next week are Steve McGarry from WPP and Becky Woods from ADP. So another two very experienced global mobility professionals. And of course, Julia will be back with us again next week to give us a global update. So all that really remains is for me to thank everybody LinkedIn for taking part and joining in the conversation. If you've got any further questions, just put them into the LinkedIn feed or to message any of us. I'm sure we'll come back to you. And just to say that if anybody does want to download that checklist, as I say, it's completely free on the Benevo website. Feel free to download it. Hopefully, at the minimum, it stimulates a conversation. And in terms of the technology, if anybody's interested in learning more about how you can track your employees, do let us know. But anyway, all that remains for me is to say thank you and goodbye to everybody, and see you again this time next week.
Thank you. Be well,
Thank you
everyone.
very much.
Appreciate it.